And we're live. Hello and welcome again to what are we high leverage actions, helping you to find your higher self. And today we're going to be talking about comfort zones. And this is following on with we talked about other circles last week, and we're going to have more circles this week, but without the picnic plate. And we talked about what was it? The circles of influence last week and pushing boundaries with people. So we're going to bring that into comfort zones today. And let's crack on. So my name is Kay Reeve. I'm an emotional awareness expert. And I'll let you introduce yourself, Rory.
My name's Rory Lemonade I go by, and I am a neurodiversity and creative flow coach for neurodiverse creative professionals to get out of their difficult self-sabotaging and procrastination and into creative flow around whatever visions they have for their ideal work.
Fantastic. And with the emotional awareness stuff for me, I always think, how can we fix something if we're not aware of it? You need to know it exists before we can repair it, heal it, or work forward with it. So that's exactly what we're doing through this podcast and this series is to help you find your higher self by raising awareness and giving you the tools to become the authentic version of you that you want to be. So, comfort zones. Who's kicking off tonight, Rory?
Ah, good question.
Yeah, we haven't even
Um,
discussed that before coming on, have we?
yeah, so what does it mean to me? Comfort zones. A comfort zone to me is like one way of thinking about it is that there's a point in which, well, there's a range in which we know stuff that feels real and familiar. I like
Mm,
the word familiarity. So if we're familiar with something, we've seen it before, we've learnt a pattern around it, and we can then maybe explore that zone with more greater detail than before because we're comfortable with what we can see, and then we can then be in that zone so that, yeah, being in that zone and feeling relaxed and clear-headed,
mm,
and yeah, those are the things that come with comfort zones in a way. So a way of being one example would be going going on holiday
mm,
to stay in a house that don't know the area in, and the first day you're there, it's all new, and then you learn where everything is to use and have a night there or 2 nights there, and you get really familiar with the house and how to use it and what to do there. But outside of that house is all new things,
mm.
and that's another way of putting it. Is that sense of new and familiar. The new can be unknown. I'll get into more detail with that. But yeah, what do you get from that?
Yeah, I think that's really good actually. And when you talk about what you know, familiar with, and like this inside outside, very much with these comfort zones, I think there's also about feelings that go with that because some things we know and familiar with can also be a source of discomfort as well. But then going outside of an area could be an exploratory, exciting thing to go and explore. So I think it's one thing to say, for me, comfort zone is what we're familiar with, but what we understand and feel that we're not losing control of our lives with. Like for me, for example, pushing comfort zones was getting on a motorbike. When I'm not familiar, like you say, there is an element of familiar and knowing, was getting on a motorbike, even sitting on the back. When I knew nothing about the safety elements or how to ride it, it was completely out of my comfort zone. But by the time I'd learned how to ride pillion, how not to ride pillion, and done short journeys on the back as a pillion passenger, and just practiced, and that's to me is also an element of practice and a willingness to push that comfort zone, it became more natural for me, more exciting, more enjoyable, more adventurous. And for some people, they may never push that comfort zone and may always go, no, that's it, that's my safety zone and I'm staying in it. So it's choosing where we push comfort zones and not. And other things, I think it might be things that are more out of our control to choose. And one great one I like to use an example of is being at the scene of an accident. And if you've got three people who we're going to compare here, the first one is the first on the scene. They're not first aid trained, they're not a paramedic, they know nothing about rescuing people at an accident, but they're there straight after the accident. This puts them way out of their comfort zone because they don't know, they're not familiar with, and have no idea how to handle the scene. They're not trained, they have no equipment, and therefore are likely to panic. And the only thing they know how to do is to phone 999 and are likely to be very panicky on the phone call. Now, the second person we'll compare is a first aider. So somebody who has some training and perhaps a small first aid kit in the glove box or in their boot. And they are going to be a little bit more comfortable with approaching the scene, know some of the basics they can do to perhaps save a life or to at least keep a patient stable. Again, calling the paramedics, they're still going to have anxiety and uncertainties and deal with a little like PTSD reactions afterwards and so on. So it's still going to be out of their comfort zone at the scene of an accident, but they will attempt to deal with it with a little less panic and hopefully a lot less panic than the initial bystander. So they might have followed in a second or third car and come up afterwards. The third person that would arrive at the scene of an accident would be the paramedics. They are fully trained. They are fully equipped. They don't come alone. They work as a team with colleagues. They have further resources available on contact, whether it is helicopters, more backup crews, special advice and so on. And they come and they deal with it naturally as part of their everyday life. And for them, what to that bystander was completely outside of the comfort zone, was kind of on the edge for the first aider, is completely in the comfort zone of a paramedic and the ambulance drivers and so on. And the same with any job. So for me, when we're looking at it career-wise, and even anything, it's what we know can expand and grow, and what we learn and become more aware of and trained for, equipped for, and have, going back to circles of influence last week, having the right team around us, and especially in any job role, can all help to reduce that feeling of discomfort in what we're doing. So that's my take on it so far.
I like the analogy. Yeah, I love that analogy. That
Mm.
helps a lot to visualize that kind of approach. Um
Mm.
and yeah, there's like it's more easy in some ways to notice a physical comfort zone because it's tangible and seeable. So for instance, um like I say, if you're used to a particular town, and you go shopping there all the time, and you've expanded that comfort zone to not just your house but the town, and then going off there. But as soon as there's a road that you might drive down, that you weren't expecting to, that's not unknown, it suddenly becomes uh, yeah, it suddenly becomes an unknown territory, and so there's always going to be a sense of alertness in the background psychologically,
Yeah.
just in case, because there's if as soon as there's comfort, then there can be a sense of relaxation. So if you're in your bed at night or somewhere where you're really comfortable and familiar, you're able to relax fully. That's when we're allowed. We can sleep.
Mm.
So when it comes to like mental and psychological comfort zones, it can actually be much more confusing because it's not seeable. And so that sense of uh, where where we may feel completely familiarized and comfortable and relaxed may just blur into being unaware if we're having a particular thought or a, because I like to say there's a free zone of motion. If we've got like, say for instance, I've got a sore shoulder and I move it and it gets painful there, but I can move it here and here. That's my free zone of motion. But if I go there, I get pain. So so I can actually move within this free zone. With the mind, we can just go straight to the worst case scenario and imagine it. And so, and that's what the brain will do, in fact. If we,
Yeah.
there's no point fighting it in some ways if we know we'll go there, because we'll go there in order to make sure the reference point of here is not there. But because we go there, we often, it took me a long time before I did lots of mental fitness training to realize that I could go there and also not believe it, that
Yeah.
it was actually happening. And but even then, when we're thinking of things, we will still be on alert, that sense of alertness before it gets into danger zone. So there's
Yeah.
like comfort, then there's like alertness to make sure, just in case. And that, and we're often like decision making, going off into either worst case scenarios or they call it negative bias. Is it's in order to protect and make sure we're safe. So we could be on high alert or just even alert more
Mm.
than necessary in our day, which will then slowly rise our stress levels in terms of physical chemicals and all that stuff will build up throughout the day until, uh, if it's over a number of years, it could turn into chronic stress without realizing. So it's about what we're believing and what we're not believing. And that's where I would like to say one more thing
Mm.
is when people talk about neurodivergence and or neurodiverse people, it's just a statistic that I'm talking about here, as opposed to neurotypical, which is just a statistic. However, the idea being that um, uh, there's out of the box thinking,
Yeah.
and out of the box thinking, what is the box? It is
Point.
it is one thing can be described as is our mental comfort zone. But not going to the point. We don't have to think outside the box in terms of. So there's negative bias, which will cause stress if we stay in imagination and belief zone of what we're thinking and feeling. There's also out of the box that goes to unfamiliar territory that is not thought of before. But it doesn't have to be scary. It can also be positive.
Mm.
So there's the comfort zone. I would like to bring in the idea that it doesn't have to be a comfort, a familiar zone of all negative and all all worrying. It can also be, what if I paint a flamingo green, which is not dangerous at all, but it's still unfamiliar and it's still thinking outside of the box.
Yeah. And that's great. And I think listening to that, what I'm hearing is it's like living physically inside of a comfort zone and not taking risks while mentally constantly existing outside of the comfort zone in anxiety and stress and worry. And there is a lot of people that do that. I've been there myself. I know how difficult it is to break the patterns, but it is possible. And so, yeah, that is one thing, is to exist in one but be thinking in the other. Other people can do the opposite. They can be out there and be massive risk takers, but live it as if they're living in the comfort zone and just not be afraid of anything. And so it works both ways. But for a majority, I think, of healthy people, we want to get to a healthy state where you're feeling like your comfort zone expands a little with whatever's regular to you in your life. You don't want to be trying to live your daily life feeling restricted by your comfort zone. You want it to be large enough to give you room to move. But at the same time, be able that when you need to, you can push outside that comfort zone and understand that that's excitement and adventure and challenge and growth, because you cannot grow inside your comfort zone, but also to recognize through like gratitudes and mindfulness and stuff like that, when to come back into your comfort zone, because I think it's also important to rest, relax, recuperate. And I'm going to hand that back over to you there, Rory, because that's your stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's great because it's people. There's a lot of in the coaching industry. There's a lot of talk about stepping outside your comfort zone, making challenges and pushing. Like going to the gym is an outside of the comfort zone for a muscle, and people can get used to the pleasure of challenge without it feeling painful or dangerous to work out on their muscles. But if you went from a space of not doing that at all to suddenly doing it, it could be really achy the next day or feeling like it's awful when you're doing it. And if you were forced to do it, it would be even worse. So that sense of comfort zone physically, and then the mental part with the relaxation, it's just as important to be able to rest and relax um, in in
Actually, we're both off tonight, different ways.
attacked by cats. About my immune system's outside of my comfort zone at the moment with the cat allergy.
House sitting cats, yeah.
Yeah. So but that's all good. So
I've got another thing come up as well, actually, about pushing comfort zones and having support as well. And sometimes when you are outside of your comfort zone, you don't automatically have a way of getting back in it, depending on what's happened. And we had that exact same thing happen last week. I pushed my comfort zones to go for a longer than usual drive. Um, and I've got to mention this on tonight. Rory has actually launched his book now. But on our way to London, the car broke down. So we were in that place. We don't know. And to get back in our comfort zone and get back on track. And for me, it was like, I'm traveling in a place I don't know. My car is broken down. I don't know how to get where I've got to go, because navigating driving's within my comfort zone. My driving skill's fine, but navigating is outside my comfort zone. So Rory came with me for emotional support to go into London. And then we ended up launching his book in London instead of somewhere else, because we'd broken down, got delayed. But we needed that support. So for me, having Rory in the car was tremendous support. But also, we didn't know how to fix the car. So we needed support from other people to come and recover the car, to help us find a garage to recover it to, somebody to help get it repaired, and so on and so on. And so sometimes comfort zones are not a choice. You are just put in a place where things go wrong. And when you understand more about all of these strategies, and they are the times when instead of panicking, you go, okay, this is outside my comfort zone. I don't know how to deal with this. This is where you have plans. Like I'd made sure I'd got my recovery number on my phone before I made the journey. So I know, made sure my car's insured. I made sure I've got my recovery number dialed in, ready to go in the event something happened. And it did, which made it much easier. Because if I'd broken down and I didn't even have recovery or rescue to call, then I would have had an even bigger problem, would have been more emotionally outside my comfort zone. So it wasn't even just a physically now, it's emotionally in this strange place, miles from anywhere I knew. So it's all about, at the end of the day, managing the emotions, because whatever the comfort zone topic is, whether it is like at the scene of an accident, going to the gym, whether it is going for a new job interview, whether it is socializing and meeting new people, it's all about the emotions. That's really the only thing that exists in and outside of that comfort zone, is the emotions. The rest of it is all down to how your emotions process what you know, think, feel, do, react to, interact with. And it's how to be aware of that and use that knowledge to get yourself into a place where your emotions feel comfortable, whatever happens. And yeah, we definitely tested it to the max last week.
Yeah.
So many ways. But yeah, it worked well. But yeah.
Yeah, it was brilliant. And it was a case of telling ourselves that it was all going to be okay at points
Yeah.
in order to stay on the vision of what is wanted, and whatever comes in the way will break or make our comfort zone.
Mm.
And that's the point, is that it's just, yeah, it's fascinating how to look at it as a point of this, the comfort zone changes, on a regular basis. So
Mm.
every day, if you stay more and more, try to stay more and more comfortable, the actual range in which we feel comfortable will shrink, because we're not expanding it. It's not giving ourselves a reference point for what's comfortable and what isn't. So so that's why it's actually quite important to keep practicing exercise for like joints and bodies, to stay stay aware and challenged in a way that keeps the blood flow going and the strength of the tissues, and being able to like practice balancing. So to know where we were like walking in space, and the more still I would stay, the less my nervous system will get used to motion. So so that's why elderly people get to practice keep moving, and dance is a great one, because you're on your feet and you're moving with your feet, and because otherwise it can become unstable and fall over by mistake more often. And so that's an idea around the physical comfort zone of challenging and moving and staying adaptable. And that's the word that I love. I love that word, adaptable, because it's about staying flexible and adaptable to the situations, to be able to not get too worried about it. And finally, it's that thing of, yes, the coaching industry talks about the comfort zone and stretching it, and that's because it is important, but it's also just as important to be feeling comfortable half the time as well, so that we can keep that adaptability of that zone changing.
Yeah. And that's another good point, actually. Even when you're saying about dancing, for you, music and dance is a massive part of your life. So you'll do that without really thinking about it to push your physical comfort zones. But for you, socially, emotionally, dancing is not outside your comfort zone. But for other people, the mere thought of dancing, even alone, let alone in front of a partner or in front of a room full of people at an event, is an absolute no-go. It's a massive fear from them for them to get up on a dance floor and dance. Um, so I
Even
think,
doing this,
hmm?
even doing this.
Yeah, some, do you know, there are some people that won't even sit and do that.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I've known them. I've known them.
I was being silly, but yeah, it's that thing of, yeah, it is important to
Mm,
think of it in a way in which is like a skill that can only grow with a little bit of challenge every day. If we suddenly go, yeah, we suddenly put someone that's not used to dancing in the middle of a dancing circle of people, they'd be like, ah.
yeah. And I think it is about whether or not you choose to overcome that as a fear. So for some people, these comfort zones really are a genuine fear as opposed to a just couldn't be bothered to do it. So there's the ones that you just don't see the importance of challenging because they're just not relevant to you. And there's the ones that regularly come up as a fear. And another one is supposedly the world's number one fear is public speaking. Now, I know that is a comfort zone that both Rory and I have both had to overcome massively. And for some things, you will only overcome those comfort zones by doing them and doing them until you are comfortable with them. And I know for myself that I went to a public speaking group to try and learn to speak. And I sat in a room full of 50 people. And the first thing I had to do was stand up and say my name and answer a question with one sentence. And my heart was going like this and I couldn't hear what anybody else was saying because I was so scared of what I was going to get up and say. And I was terrified of just getting up in a room full of 50 people and saying one sentence. A year later, I stood on stage in front of 300 people live on YouTube and gave a TEDx talk. What a difference. Because I pushed my comfort zones and I challenged myself. And was it terrifying? Yes, it was still terrifying. But am I glad I did it? Absolutely. So I can put the link to the TEDx in here later anyway, as I've mentioned it. But yes.
That's
And you know,
that's great because it's crossing over. Even if you feel terrified, you feel comfortable. There's still a comfort zone that crosses over. That's again going from complete comfort to like, oh, I'm just going to sleep
yeah,
to like alert and or to actually physically scared, but that knowing that it's made up and that it's
yes,
just something that can be learnt. So again, it's not just suddenly comfort and uncomfort. It's
yeah.
there's degrees of it, and that's what is really interesting about it, you know.
It was really interesting actually. You're right, because there were a lot of mixed feelings. I was really excited about doing this talk, but the whole day, because I got there at 8:30 in the morning and I wasn't speaking till 5:30 in the afternoon. There were 27 speakers and I was number 25. So on the one hand, I had all day to sit with stage fright, even though I was excited about doing it. And then for the 10 minutes that somebody else was speaking before mine and they're putting all the mics on, I was shaking and I was breathing heavy. And I'm standing behind this big speaker off the side of the stage out of view, just doing all my breathing and my sort of like yoga meditation. But then the strange thing is, as soon as they announced me onto the stage, and I looked at it was really weird in my moment, and you've called me a crocodile before, but this is we won't go into that tonight. I just looked at these stairs going up to the stage, and it was like looking at crocodile's teeth I was walking into. But the minute I put my foot off the top step onto that stage, all the fear went. We had the most amazing MC there who introduced me, said what I was going to speak about. And for some reason or other, as soon as what happened then was, you see, I got into the point where I had rehearsed. And this is another thing is rehearsing. Rehearsing anything that you want to overcome the fear of is also a really great way to practice. And this was very much the same when I did first aid, doing all the resuscitation. We practiced and practiced and practiced resus to a point where I'd done my resus exam 9 times in 1 year. The day I actually had to drag a friend out of a car and resuscitate him on the side of a road, I didn't have to think twice how to do it. It was in my comfort zone to resuscitate a friend. And it sounds strange saying that now, but I literally didn't have to think about it. And so I was nervous all day with this speech in the same way. But I had practiced this speech 50 times in the 2 days before the TEDx talk. And so once I stepped on that stage and the MC started speaking, the minute he walked off stage and I went into my speech, I'd rehearsed it so much, I had nothing left to be anxious about. But the anxiety, I suppose, all day was worrying about, would I forget my lines? You know, really, that was the main one. Was I going to forget my lines? How was it going to go on stage? But it just went brilliantly. And it was just 10 minutes. But it was about that rehearsal was really important, whatever we do. And even if it is socializing, and I know for a lot of people with neurodiversity, being in social situations is very difficult. Maybe traveling on buses for the first time, like Rory found out this week. I'm very nervous about going on different trains and things. And I'm not very good with public transport because I've grown up in the countryside and spent most of my life in the countryside where I don't have a lot of public transport access. So I've always driven a car. So for me to go and get on public transport, I don't know what I'm getting on, where it's going. I can't follow the timetables, and I'm completely overwhelmed with all the signs and people going everywhere. it's not the same rules and social rules and directional rules as getting in a car and following the highway code. So for me, that was outside my comfort zone. But the more I do it, the more I practice it, the more I become familiar. So that's what I've got to work on. And I will get there. I will get there. But it
Yeah.
is for a lot of people in neurodiversity, even just having conversations with strangers, with people we don't know, with even with family. If it's a family member that you're perhaps not quite as comfortable breaking through with in conversation, keep trying. And one day you'll find that topic that just triggers things off and away you go, or a colleague that you struggle to connect with. It's just finding that way to connect. And yeah, I mean, I'm going to hand that back to you there, Rory, because I think I've never had a problem communicating. So I've probably had a problem not communicating. I talk too much. But I know for you that's been a big topic. So maybe a bit about how you've dealt with that to inspire others. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I didn't feel like I knew how to speak very easily because of not being able to take in information. So it was more a case of either not being able to feel like I could take in the information and respond to it, unless it was a one-to-one, like call and response conversation. That was fine. But yeah, even then, I'd probably miss the stuff I'd want to say, or
Mm,
not say it fully. When I would want to say an idea, I would not get it. I'd only get partially bits of it out, so the person wouldn't necessarily understand everything that I wanted to say before
mm,
it got passed back on again. So it was more frustration than comfort zone. But there were certainly I'd happily walk up to people and listen because I loved people. So that's another thing around how to realize that I was extroverted, but processing information differently or slowly, rather than introverted and actually finding it a challenge to be around people for too long. Um,
mm.
I could be around, but I just ended up coming away just wishing that I felt like I'd actually connected properly or said what I wanted to say. And so, and then I'd ruminate on it and try to say these things outside of it, and it just wouldn't work through text. So it's that, yeah, it is fascinating. And I think really what you shared about it being suddenly okay, the actual event being suddenly okay compared to what is perceived might happen.
Mm.
It's a great, and again, the final for me, final point to bring up here is that sense of perception and what something might be like is the psychological comfort zone that will jump ahead of time and actually stop us from doing something physical, which then when we do the physical thing, we get the feedback that it was safe and then we get better at doing it. Rather than
Yeah,
if we don't do this, if we the psychological will get there first before we even get a chance to step into the room. So that's the point is to expect that negative bias and know that the perception of what we think may happen is all made up.
mm,
100%. Yes, there's logic, and we can go through scenarios about what may or may not happen to be prepared for if that happens, and if that happens, and if that happens, and if that happens. If that's a great problem solving risk assessment of a new thing that is uncomfortable or unfamiliar. And so, risk assessment, but it from an objective, a much more objective point of view, that's safe and relaxed and being in your comfort zone to risk assess something is completely different to um, getting caught up in it and worrying about it. So that's why I like to say that to notice the difference between concern, worry, and anxiety.
yeah,
And anxiety may have extra things about it that can't be tied down to or understood logically. So,
mm,
but we can definitely notice what worry is about, which is needless wasting resources on um yeah, being concerned. It's like being concerned with a feeling is worry, and it's completely non-useful in a lot of ways. Anxiety, maybe there's maybe something really, really important to be aware of that we don't know.
Think that comes back to I'm just seeing, sorry, interrupting there. Coming back to me talking earlier about sitting pillion on the bike. Um, I ended up sitting pillion going across the Alps. Now, on the back of the Alps, when we've got steep drops one side, rocks the other, we're on hairpin bends and traffic coming the other way, there was a lot to worry about. And there was a fine line between moment to moment, me focusing on being a responsible pillion, leaning with the bike and not causing the bike to go off track, because as a pillion, you're as responsible as the rider. So there was the focus on what I can do to get it right. There was the worry about the risks. So to a degree, that worry is there for a reason, because if I wasn't aware of the risks, I might not avoid the dangers by not taking the right actions. But then there's the anxiety of what happens if this happens and we fall off and we go down that cliff and go off the hairpin bend. And so the anxiety was the bit where I was trying not to go in the panic attack and keep in the focus zone, like being aware of the worries, staying in the focus zone, enjoying the ride and trying not to go into the panic. So I get there's all of this going on at the same time on this bike ride, and it was hair raising in several ways. But yes, Rory.
I just wanted to say that that's interesting because I think you're associating different meanings to worry and anxiety to me.
Yeah.
Whereas, and that's interesting. And we all got that's why we've all got different associations with the words. But to me, the anxiety of is was real in order to one slip and it could be or one drive off and it would not be useful, let's say.
Yeah.
So that's the anxiety for me coming up. That's real to actually stay focused, whereas worry is needless and unuseful to me because
Okay.
worry is 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 it's no point to me. It's no point worrying about it. Use the anxiety to stay focused and on form, because there
Mm.
is a real risk to stay focused and on form. Whereas worrying about it at the same time is
Mm.
not so useful. Yeah.
Interesting. Fine line between worry and anxiety. And I suppose as a mum and a grandmother, I've always had this sense of, yes, you worry about your children and your grandchildren. And again, I think for me, but everybody's going to have a different take on this, I suppose. But the thing is whatever you're taking is being aware of where it sits for you. But I've always seen it that, yes, if something's happening, my grandchildren are here, there is a sense of worry about what they're going to do to hurt themselves. So therefore, I can use that knowledge, be aware of it, and use that knowledge to make it safe for them. So if I'm worried about them hitting the head on the corner of a coffee table, maybe I could put something in the way, or move it out the way. But for me, anxiety was the bit where whatever that worry or anxiety or feelings are about, there is no cure for. They're things that I can't, they are purely about my own thoughts, feelings, and belief, with no way of resolving them with simple actions or behaviors or whatever it is. So to
Yeah.
me, worrying was the bits where I can control back into safety, but anxiety were the bits where like you say, you're going on a road trip, you're going swimming and you're worried about drowning or something, there are lots of ways. For me, anxiety is actually also a sensation I had a lot the last few years, waking up every morning with a panic attack. And I literally did wake up every day with this massive panic attack, but no reason for it that I could tie it down to. Now, for me, ultimately, it was slightly different. I actually ended up finding out it was linked to food allergies. So waking up with this massive sense of anxiety every day and these like sort of waking up panic attack things, almost like I'm drowning, but without the water. That to me was the anxiety, but the worry is like going down the stairs when I had back pain, worrying about falling down the stairs. So it's hanging on the rail properly, using the walking stick properly, and making sure that I traverse up and down the stairs safely by counteracting the worry. But the anxiety for me is just a whole different level. But yeah, like, it's interesting to hear your take on it though, Rory. Um,
Mm.
but it's how I'd put meaning to it, but it doesn't mean my meaning's the correct way, and or that yours is correct or incorrect. It's just being aware for every individual where you place your own worries, anxieties, fears, comfort zones, etc., etc. And that awareness instantly starts to give you a little bit more control. And if it is something that, like I said, waking up the complete panic attack for me, I was having to have to work that down. I am in a safe space. I'm in my bed. There is nothing to panic about today. And there was all these feelings that were coming up with no foundation to them at all. So having to then override them with positive affirmations, positive thinking. And then once I discovered the food allergies, eating healthy as well to control that anxiety. But that is a very unusual route. Not everybody's panic attacks are going to be linked to food like mine was. But whatever your reason, it's giving you those signals and those messages to listen to. And I think that's the other thing, is listening to your body, to your feelings, to your reactions. And noticing all of that is really important. Separate them out. But yeah, I'm going to keep going on for hours if I carry on, Rory.
Well, I think we've covered
Examples.
it. I think we've covered it.
Yeah. So there we go. It's challenging your comfort zones, because it's the only way we grow. If they're stuck and you stay inside it, there's no growth. So challenge those comfort zones. You don't have to bust through them. You can keep them yes or no. So if you don't wish to challenge your comfort zone around, I don't know, handling spiders, you don't have to. But if you want to challenge your comfort zones around social circles, there's something to work on, and you don't have to go out all out to like kill or cure type methods. You can grow gradually and expand your comfort zone slowly, and listening, really listening to yourself. And also, if there is something that you want to work on and you're not sure how to work through it, don't really fully understand it, and you want support, which was the other thing we said, sometimes emotional support is also really important to getting you out of your comfort zone. Rory and I are both here. We're both contactable. I'll put the links in the chat below, and reach out to us. That's what we do. We help you find your higher self. So thank you, Rory, for joining me again today. Awesome talk.
Yay.
um,
Yeah, brilliant.
I wonder what we're going to talk about next week. We haven't even led on to anything. Should we leave it a surprise?
Yeah, we could leave a surprise. There's something about you mentioned something that could have led on to it, but you've already got a list. So
We've got a list. We'll find something. We'll leave next week's a surprise. But so far, we'd threaded everything through and haven't planned ahead this week. So we'll push out of our side of our comfort zones and yeah, come back and find out what it is.
yay.